this extraordinary meeting of council. And I'm pleased to declare it open and welcome those councillors and the members of the public joining us in these chambers, as well as those councillors joining us remotely and members of the public watching remotely. Before we begin, I'll call on Councillor Santa to give the acknowledgement of country.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On behalf of all present and those watching on webcast, I would like to acknowledge the Cammeraygal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of this land, and pay our respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and hopes of Aboriginal Australia. We must always remember that under all our ideas in this council for this land and its community, it was, is and always will be traditional Aboriginal land.
Thank you, Councillor Santa. If you could turn your microphone off. Thank you. Councillors, there's been a request from Councillors Carr, Keane and Spencerley who have sought to attend tonight's meeting remotely. Is there a motion? Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move to allow Councillors Councillors Spencerley, Keane and Carr to attend remote.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Antonini. I'll put the item. All those in favour? Those against? And that is carried. Well, we welcome Councillors Carr, Keane and Spencerley to the meeting. Are there any disclosures of interest to any of the items on the agenda? Councillor Carr. Yeah, if you could unmute yourself, thank you.
Yeah. I would like to declare a pecuniary interest in the operational plan 25-26, and I will step out when that item is being discussed.
Could you repeat which item?
The operational plan 25-26.
Thank you, Councillor. This meeting is being recorded and made publicly available on Council's website. Those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements. By attending the meeting, you are giving consent to your image and voice being webcast. Councillors, council staff and members of the public must ensure that mobile phones are turned to silent during meetings of the council, and councillors who need to use their phone to text, talk or engage in social media activity must leave the chamber to do so. As it's an extraordinary meeting, we will go straight to the first item, item 8.1, draft fees and charges schedule 25-26 post-exhibition report. Is there a mover of the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Berrigan, seconded by Councillor Santa. Do you wish to speak to the item?
No, Mayor, the item is very self-explanatory, and I thank the staff for turning it around so quickly.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to the item?
I would like to speak to
Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I would like to speak to the draft fees and charges. I just want to make some commentary around there's no consistency in the modelling, for example, with the coal loader fees going up to 600%. I mean, that's just unacceptable. It's too big a rise for a small business. It's a bit like the rate rise, 87%. That was rejected. This should be too. These businesses need to manage their own budgets. This should be done slowly and more measured. I also want to highlight the community consultation. What are we not getting right? We only got one submission. According to our papers, one of our e-newsletters went to 2,000 people and 3 people are clicking on the link. This was evident across our other newsletters as well, with only single figures opening the link. From all that activity and the size of our databases, there's a lot of people subscribing and we're only getting one submission. Where is the social media again, connecting to different parts of our electorate? We need to think differently about how we're communicating and be more progressive.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Keane. If you could mute yourself again. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Carr.
Yes, I would like to endorse Councillor Keane's comments and again say I think we need to do better in terms of our community consultation.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to the item? If not, I will put the, Councillor Berrigan, do you wish to write of reply? I'll put the item. All those in favour and those against? That's Councillor Keane and Councillor Carr. The item is carried. Thank you. Before we move on to the next item, I note that Councillor Welsh has arrived and ask whether you have any disclosures of interest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do. For the next item, I have a non-pecuniary significant interest. I'm just going to lay out the pages. Page 50. This is of the 442 pages from the North Sydney Council Delivery Program and Operational Plan. Page 71, page 92, and page 127.
If I could ask you to expand on that, does each of those items relate to the Crows Nest Community Centre as when we dealt with the draft to go on exhibition?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And those pages also deal with the other community centres, including the Kirribilli Neighbourhood Centre.
I believe they do. Yes.
Thank you. Councillors, we have registered speakers for the next item. 2 registered speakers. So, Councillor Berrigan.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that we open the public forum to hear from the speakers before we engage in debate for item 8.2.
Thank you. So that brings us to the first registered speaker, Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. If you would come forward, please. Give your name. Address the council.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. I'm a resident of Cremorne. Quite a few years ago, I lived in an apartment building where there was a water leak through the building fabric, causing damage to one apartment. The Strata Committee refused to fix the leak. They said Annie can't afford a special levy. She's asset rich, but income poor. Councillor Keane recently attended a Willoughby Bay precinct meeting. She said she had met homeowners who told her if the special rates variation was approved, they would have to sell their homes. They were, Councillor Keane said, asset rich, but income poor. The Annies of North Sydney are celebrating. The Annies don't want to pay for services such as community transport. The Annies don't want to pay for road pavement renewals or stormwater gross pollutant traps. The Annies don't want to pay for fixing water leaks. I, like most residents, want services to be provided. I want my community's assets to be properly maintained. I want the shabby Cremorne Plaza to be refurbished to help local businesses. But the very independent IPART has said, no tidy town for you. You have to put up with reduced services and crumbling infrastructure. I have read the delivery program and operational plan. It spreads the pain of cost reductions and revenue increases and makes prudent provisions for raising funds if needed. I support the recommendation with a request for one amendment. I'd like to see the proposed sale and leaseback of Neutral Bay Community Centre off the table. I'm willing to bet Councillor Keane never suggested to the Annies of North Sydney that they sell their homes and rent in the area. They would have said, well, that's a dumb idea. In its planning proposal for 12-storey towers on Military Road, landowner Arcadia says it wants to acquire the Neutral Bay Community Centre and replace it with a tenancy in its development overlooking Military Road. Well, that's a dumb idea. As Councillor Spenceley told the council in early 2022, residents don't want 12 storeys in Neutral Bay. They also don't want the Grosvenor Lane car park or the Neutral Bay Community Centre privatised. I would ask that you consider deleting delivery program item S2.8, which says work with landowners to deliver a new accessible Neutral Bay Community Centre. Since the only landowner with a planning proposal offering new accommodation is Arcadia, this really says negotiate a deal with Arcadia. As an alternative, please amend section 2.8 to read, consult with the community and users regarding the need to upgrade accommodation for Neutral Bay Community Centre, with any actions dependent on securing funding. By the way, the Annie I first mentioned is now in a nursing home. Her son is on the strata committee and has voted for a special levy for repairs to fix a leak into Annie's apartment. It is only when communal owners agree to contribute, preserve and maintain our precious assets and services that we get good outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you for your participation. Councillors, if you recall, when this came to us for exhibition, we had a procedural motion to allow for Councillor Carr and Councillor Welsh to participate on the bulk of the item, and we pulled out those matters relating to two community centres, the Crow's Nest Centre and the Kirribilli Neighbourhood Centre, and I propose that we do the same again now. Councillor Berrigan?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have a procedural motion, which I've actually sent in for time, that again, to handle it in two tranches to allow both councillors Carr and Welsh to vote on the matters. So I'm proposing that we debate the item with the exception of pages 50, 71, 92, 121 and 127 of the 442-page report.
I wonder whether you take on in relation on those pages to the Kirribilli Neighbourhood Centre and Crow's Nest Centre, because there are
To
others,
specify, yes?
Yep.
Yep.
with the exception of
the
matters
exception,
relating
With the
to.
exception of matters relating to the Crow's Nest Centre and the Kirribilli Neighbourhood Centre.
Is there a seconder for that procedural motion? Seconded by councillor Antonini. I'll put that procedural motion. All those in favour? And those against? And that is carried. So we will now move to, we will leave that second tranche relating to the two community centres to after we have dealt with the first. Is there a move councillor Berrigan?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion as per the recommendation with the exceptions made, but I would like to add a 2. That S 2.8 be replaced with consult with the community and all relevant stakeholders to deliver a new accessible Neutral Bay Community Centre.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded by councillor Holding. Do you wish to speak to it?
Can you just, Madam Mayor, just quickly, can you just review that item, please? Is it Crow's Nest or Neutral Bay?
It's not Crow's Nest, it's Neutral Bay.
Oh, Neutral Bay.
It's reading Crow's Nest.
Yeah, thank you.
And sorry, Madam Mayor, just one other item. In the previous recommendation of the page numbers, they weren't the same as what Councillor Berrigan read out. So it doesn't need to be done now, but if you can just make sure that it correlates to those pages.
50, 71, 92 and 127 were those identified by councillor Welsh. So 124 is to be.
I thought I heard 121.
Well, it says 124, which
Okay,
also
that's okay.
does include, I'm
That's okay.
advised, does include those community centres. So it is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Keane. Councillor Berrigan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd just like to thank the council staff for turning around a huge report and taking into consideration all the feedback that has been received. It's sobering reading, and I don't think anybody in our community is by any means thrilled with what we are having to resolve upon tonight. Like our speaker, I know many of the community, whilst not putting in a submission, understood that our rates are very low and our service delivery expectations are high, and one cannot go hand in hand with the other. It is really depressing to read the report that, again, because our reserves, not surpluses, reserves have been absolutely raided because of the awful impacts of the inherited North Sydney Olympic Pool project, which I voted against over 25 times. that we now are kicking the can down the road on asset renewals, and we are going to get to the stage very soon that they're going to be a replacement. It's quite disgraceful that people still are celebrating that there is no additional revenue for this council in a time of enormous growth, where people living in this area have benefited from generations before them that have acted in a community-centred way. And now we are having to deny people coming into North Sydney the service levels and assets at a state that we can be proud of.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I would like to recognise the efforts of Council to find savings in the budget without cutting services that the community places a high value on. Despite the positive outcome, I cannot endorse the 4-year plan as presented. The plan includes a list of unfunded projects. Yes, they are appropriately marked as projects requiring additional funding. However, unfunded projects should not appear on an endorsed plan when funding is unclear and resourcing is not identified. Approving this document would imply that these projects have been approved when they have not had the community scrutiny and consultation that is essential. In addition, further work and refinement of the funded projects is required to ensure that the plans are clear and understood by the community. This council continues to ignore community concerns at its peril. The community has made its concerns loud and clear. Concerns not just about the decisions being made, but how the decisions are being made. The materials provided are long and frankly inaccessible to many residents. They are overwhelming and are more of a barrier than a bridge to engagement. On top of that, our residents are quite rightly asking where the transparency, clarity, and accountability is. And yet, despite all this, Council continues to rely on the informing strategies. Strategies that have already been rejected by the community. Let's be clear. IPART has told us that this council must do better, that it must listen, that it must engage, not simply inform. If we keep ignoring this, we risk losing the important thing any council can have, and that is public trust. And let's talk about that trust. The council says it upholds the principle of one person, one vote, one value, whether through an individual submission or one from a community group. So when a
Councillor Carr, you're breaking up. Your Wi-Fi seems to be.
Unanimous majority submission. That should not be dismissed as one comment. It represents the voices of all who voted. Council statistics should reflect that.
Councillor Carr, you are breaking up and freezing. You have a minute left of your time.
No, as well. They don't need more clarification. They need to know that their voices count and that this council is listening. I would like to thank the precincts and the individuals who have provided us with valuable
And again, I think you've frozen, councillor Carr.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, is there a way that councillor Carr could turn off her camera? Because that won't help.
No, under the
Wi-Fi.
code of meeting practice, you
Mm.
must have your faces available at all times.
Okay.
And comment. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Carr. Are there any other speakers?
All right. I would like to
No, sorry, councillor.
close by thanking the precincts and those.
Councillor Carr, you have completed your time and you're breaking up still. Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to respond to the speaker and say, yes, I did say that people are asset rich and cash poor, and I did sit in the chamber on the 10th of February and people said that to me straight to my face. And when I mentioned it within your precinct meeting, many of the attendees nodded and agreed with me. So it was just too high, the 87%. And I said that in the precinct meeting too. I'm speaking against the item. I have concerns with community engagement. While community consultation has taken place, I remain unconvinced that community feedback has been meaningfully incorporated. Too often we seek feedback and then proceed with a plan that looks virtually unchanged from the draft. Most residents didn't support reducing our services and supported additional income opportunities. There was support for increased advertising on council property, naming rights for the pool and North Sydney Oval, and ticketed entry to New Year's Eve, to name a few. I agree with Harrison Bennett Precinct that the projects identified within these informing strategies should be removed from the delivery program and that council should undertake fresh community consultation on the informing strategies, providing full project costings and the impacts of those projects on future rate rises and consider community views on priorities. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Michael Parker, who spent a lot of time reviewing the delivery program and operational plan and budget. I'd like to note that Mr. Parker recommends that council not agree to the current draft plan, but agree on the interim budget to keep the council running for 25-26. I'd also like to acknowledge Lavender Precinct. Lavender Precinct recommends that council seeks the minister's approval for an extension of 1 year to develop the delivery program and remove the unfunded non-core projects from the delivery plan. There are definitely options available to us councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Keane. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I would like to join Councillor Beregi in thanking the staff for the professionalism which they've addressed this problem and for the papers that they've presented to us for consideration. Also for the papers for the community consultation which has been undertaken. I'm absolutely flabbergasted by the claim that we haven't consulted with the community on this whole issue. If one compares the statutory requirements for community consultation which local government faces compared with our colleagues in the state and federal governments, it is absolutely amazing. In addition to those statutory requirements, we as a local government area have a precinct system whereby we seek the feedback from precincts, we consult with them regularly, we attend their meetings, we speak to them, we get that feedback and we welcome that feedback from the community. And to claim that we don't take their views into account is my view, a preposterous claim. One of the issues that I came away from reading the substantial community consultation paper which was presented with these papers for our consideration tonight was the overall view, which seemed to be to increase or maintain services while keeping revenues at current levels. And that view seems to be shared by some councillors. I I'm an economist by training. I'm a Keynesian economist, and against that is the monetarist theory of a person called Milton Friedman. About the one thing that he pronounced, which I agree with, and that is the statement that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And if we just cannot continue arguing that services should be maintained while doing nothing about revenues, to me is totally unrealistic. We've had these financial problems for a while. They weren't addressed by successive past nor Sydney Council, who by seeking revenues from other sources such as taking out loans or selling assets effectively kicked the can down the road. There is no alternative to rates. Rates are the most important source of our revenue, and we need to continue working in that area of rates, getting rates increase. When it comes to some of the alternatives which have been put forward, namely asset sales and loans, all my training and experience in business management says to me that if you have a revenue debt problem, you don't try to solve it through going into further debt. That's a recipe for business failure. And I fail to understand how a proposal involving further sales of assets, which once sold are gone forever, could be seen to be addressing the fundamental causes of the financial problem. Advocating that we engage in asset sales fails to acknowledge three important aspects of the assets North Sydney Council holds. First, many of these assets are held under legislative control. We simply don't have the authority to dispose of them. Second, a substantial proportion of those of our assets which are realisable are used for organisations and small businesses which have a community social benefit, like the Corner News Agency and General Store, the local art shop, the model and theatre set design shop, the tea house, the Montessori school, the cricket and tennis sports shop and the picture framer in the oval stands, the custom jewellery shop and the residential dwellings rented out at affordable rates. Would the community welcome the replacement of the traditional low-rise buildings around Ted Mack Park and Kirribilli? Yes, such as the affordable housing building which holds the little corner Easy Mart shop, a photo of which Councillor Spencerley displayed at a recent council meeting as an example of what we could be selling, with their inevitable replacement by much higher rise, medium or high density residential and office buildings. So in terms of our bottom line, one of the great reveals to me in these papers is that the dollar value of our assets is much lower than the comparable holdings of councils around us, notably Willoughby and Lane Cove. Selling our realisable assets will not cover our financial problem. By its very nature, the system of rate pegging and occasional SIV applications is a lumpy one, resulting in necessary rate rises only happening infrequently and in large chunks. Sadly, in North Sydney's case, through a combination of this lumpy system and inaction for years by previous councils, it has now fallen on this council to bear, in the absence of a meaningful rate increase, the need to withhold expenditure on the renovation of some of our necessary infrastructure and on some of the services the community expects of us. Sad but necessary. This problem will not go away, and while the current rate pegging system exists, we will in the future have to address it again through the SIV application system. Sooner or later, we
That's
will
your
have to
5
stop
minutes.
kicking the can down the road.
Thank you, Councillor Santa. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Spencerley.
Thank you, Mayor. What we're seeing is the tail end of a process that has failed at every stage to engage the community, to bring the community and the council staff along a journey together that actually results in something that the community is not going to object to in such force that we had the greatest amount of community input likely in the history of our council. Thousands of responses, probably totaling close to 3,000 individual responses, around 95 to 98% of which were against such major rate rises. This is the tail end of the process. There was no desire for community consultation. It was designed at the beginning after the election. It was 65 to 111% as a rate rise. That was there was no desire at all to have anything other than that communicated to the community. I proposed an amendment that we go out with a lower rate rise of 20% to consult with the community to get a full picture of what the community wants. The 7 councillors around the table rejected that, rejected community consultation on something that likely would have given feedback that the community was, as the end result was, unwilling to accept 87%, but was more likely to accept something around the 20% mark, which would solve our financial problems in terms of the more pressing asset renewal.
Sorry, I have to call you to a point of order. There is absolutely no factual evidence that a 20% rate rise would have solved council's financial problems. I'd ask that you withdraw and apologise.
I'm happy to apologise and withdraw. A 20% would go a long way to renewing assisting us into renewing our assets and would have allowed us to have a much higher serviceable level of debt to finish the pool. Frankly, the disgraceful thing, to use Councillor Berrigan's word, is the disgraceful thing isn't that we don't have a rate rise here today in SRV to allow us to do some of these strategies and to put money in the bank account. The disgraceful thing is that we continue to not be willing to understand that we did not listen to the community. We consulted, but we did never listen to the community. We kick the can down the road, not on asset renewals, not on spending, but we kick the can down the road simply on the fact we're unwilling to look internally and understand we did a poor job. We did a poor job on our SRV. We didn't want to communicate to the community on anything other than 65 to 111%. This is not my view. This is actually what IPART's scathing criticism of our applications came back. Engagement and community awareness did not provide sufficient information for the community to be fully aware of the need and the scale of the SRV. I mean, this is not my words, this is IPART. IPART says the North Sydney Council did not clearly identify the need for and the purpose of the proposed SRV. Financial modelling was inadequate and the end result was a financial position that was unwarranted based on IPART's set of criteria. When are we actually going to admit we did a poor job? When are we going to take this on the chin, understand we didn't align what community wanted, we didn't work within IPART's rules, we have a GM who says that IPART is a black box. IPART's not a black box. The criteria is quite simple. You know, I was able to write to the GM and explain that we were not likely to get anything approved simply by analysing IPART's criteria in detail. It's not a black box at all. We need to put something that aligns with the community into the budget, into an SRV, a request for a special rate variation.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to raise the point of order. Where is this comment that the CEO suggested IPART was a black box? Because it's not a public one. It's not one that anyone has any access to.
It was in the public briefing that was recorded back in this chamber.
I think we'll find it isn't, but continue.
Oh, happy to. The end result of all of this is we need to accept we've done a poor job. We need to remove the strategies that are not fundable, that are not realistic. We need to focus on building a long-term financial repair model. We have, Councillor Santa, who has an economics degree, claiming we have a debt problem. On what basis? Every meeting I hear Councillor Berrigan say we have $50 or $60 million worth of debt, and that's somehow apparently too much.
That's your 5 minutes. If you could wrap up.
If I'll wrap up, I'll just point out that the Office of Local Government suggests that 60% of revenue to debt is moderate. We are at 42%. Debt service cover is 4.7%. 4.7%. That is in the good band, which is less than 10%.
If you could wrap it up, please.
Please, councillors, start to listen to the community. Let's align with the community and get a plan together for the next 10 years that repairs these assets and purely looks after the interests of our community and our assets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spenceley. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Holding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Who would you rather like in this council chamber? Councillors who are prepared to stand up and tell you an uncomfortable truth, which you might not want to hear. Those people are called realists, or councillors that tell you there's no problem, nothing to worry about, and you can just carry on as normal, despite clear facts which prove otherwise. Those people could be described as fantasists. In the last 4 months, we've heard both those sets of people, the realists with an important, if uncomfortable message, and the fantasists. And there's a precedent. One person on this council voted for the North Sydney Olympic Pool to have its contract signed on New Year's Eve 2020, when design and construction plans weren't even drawn up, when we were told it would cost around $60 million and take just 2 years to build. That's a proven fantasy. But 2 people in this room, the realists, knew back then and consistently warned about the dangers of overdeveloping the pool. They correctly predicted the damage this would do to our council and its finances. The funds and reserves swallowed into just one enormous project, leaving little for anything else. That was an uncomfortable message, but they delivered it and nobody listened. The realists were correct, but sadly ignored. Fast forward to 2025, and the reality is that the pool has taken over 4 years and is predicted to cost around $122 million, more than double the fantasists claimed. I'm a realist. It's not easy sharing bad news or admitting that the whole of North Sydney was sold a big lie and fell for it. For one of the most statistically affluent and educated areas in New South Wales, it is genuinely distressing. We have $99 million in debt, a nearly finished pool, and while much of our infrastructure is in dire need of repair, not maintenance, urgent repair. IPART, in their SIV report, agreed that we proved a need for a minimum rate rise. That's what 77% of people in North Sydney pay. Confusingly, IPART then didn't instruct any rate rise, even of a lesser amount, which they are able to approve. They also described that as they wouldn't raise rates, asset sales, service cuts and other revenue rises would likely need to occur. Speaking as a realist, I don't think that will be enough. But let's hear from Councillor Keane speaking in these chambers in May. I quote, "We don't need to cut services. There have to be other options for our residents so they don't have to face service cuts. I know there are other options for our residents." End quote. I mean, I'm listening. It sounds like a fantasy. We don't need to raise rates, but we don't need service cuts either. Both this report and IPART disagree with that statement. Over the next year, this operational plan has the ability to shrink or rise with our funding. But I suspect that our lack of revenue will increase the number of cuts to services, and certainly this will be felt. Council staff have put in the work. Our current council has been further streamlined and savings made. We oversee an organisation with properly consulted strategies, long-term planning and transparent information. The operational plan gives direction, but crucially has also the ability to adapt to the thing that none of us control, the future. As a council, we must have consulted projects and plans in place. This gives us the potential to bid for grants or funding from state and federal government. In May this year, the Master Builders of Australia announced that the cost of building a typical new home in Australia has more than doubled since 2019. In just 6 years, the cost has gone up by 52%, from $250,000 to well over $500,000. And these construction costs affect our council when we repair a road, a seawall, storm drains, bus stops or buildings. The council is suffering the same increase of costs of living pressures as every individual and business. Our rates have increased by just 4%, which barely pegs with inflation, while they remain the second lowest in the whole of New South Wales, which is only a great brag if your buildings aren't in jeopardy. In real terms, we continue to go backwards and our debt has increased. So I back this operational plan and I share the view of councillors who warn, not for the first time, that a failure to tackle and enable proper long-term financial repair could be a disaster in the very near future. If you don't want a sequel to the North Sydney Olympic Pool, I urge you to listen to the realists this time, not the fantasists.
Thank you, Councillor Holding. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The recent decision by IPART to reject Council's special rate variation application places a significant obligation on us to re-examine our financial strategy and service delivery. The draft delivery program and operational plan set out a range of strategies we must now consider and potentially implement. These include reducing the number of strategic actions, cutting costs, scaling back or ceasing some of of cutting costs, scaling back, or ceasing some services, reducing infrastructure renewal efforts, and pursuing more aggressive non-rate income generation. At the same time, council will continue seeking productivity improvements to ensure we are getting the best value out of every dollar spent. Some of the key projects in the 2025-26 implementation schedule remain unfunded, either through non-rate sources or through remain funded, beg pardon, either through non-rate sources or through existing budgets within individual service units. Importantly, council remains committed to conducting a minimum of 2 service reviews each year, and these reviews will be vital to helping to deliver services more efficiently and equitably. A recent street cleaning service review resulted in a reduction of costs. The results of community consultation were, as expected, mixed, with feedback ranging from very negative to very positive. I found the comments on potential service reductions and income opportunities particularly interesting. Because the SRV was denied, council will remove the planned $8 million investment in new corporate systems in the final 3 years of the delivery program. This is a serious setback. Our current corporate systems are so outdated that some can't even interface with each other. Others still rely on manual processes. This not only reduces our internal efficiency, but limits our ability to provide timely, consistent service to our residents. It hampers effective decision-making and frustrates our workforce, and in turn, our community. Without proper investment in technology, we are stuck in a cycle of inefficiency, missed opportunities, and growing staff burnout. Over the past 2 years, council has undertaken operational reviews to improve effectiveness, and while they have made progress, the limits of the current systems are a significant barrier to further reform. It's disheartening to know that these outdated systems are still being used to deliver more than 200 service activities each year, and that we're asking the staff to do more with less, often manually, while asking them to meet growing community expectations. Let me be clear. Some of the service changes we now face will be implemented outside the established service review framework due to their urgency. These are not productivity improvements. They are survival measures. Once gone, these services will not be reinstated unless we find long-term sustainable funding. We must also consider the long-term implications of strategic divestment. I urge caution here. Once we sell a community asset, we likely will never be in a position to buy it back. That loss is permanent. I understand that the council has already generated $1.2 million in savings by holding positions vacant across the organization. While that may appear prudent on paper, it is demoralizing for staff who are asked to shoulder the burden of extra work, often without additional support. This leads to burnout, turnover, and ultimately a decline in the quality of services provided. As a councillor, I am fully committed to financial repair. We must return to a sustainable financial footing, particularly given the financial albatross we continue to carry around our necks in the form of the North Sydney Olympic Pool redevelopment. That project, enthusiastically supported by former councillors and Councillor Keane, is a stark reminder of what happens when ambition outpaces fiscal discipline. We must now lead with honesty and courage. The path forward will not be easy, but by working together, listening to our community, and focusing on delivering core services with transparency and care, we can rebuild a financially stable council that continues to serve North Sydney with integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I just note that Councillor Hoy has joined us. I must ask, do you have any disclosures of interest of the items on the agenda?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Yes.
Thank you.
And firstly, apologies for my tardiness. Nobody, I assume, wanted to be here. I know I certainly didn't want to find myself here tonight reading this delivery plan with subheadings as dire and confronting as reactive service reductions. But that's the situation we found ourselves in as a result of looming liquidity issues, a structurally weak revenue base, and a recently rejected rate variation. I want to speak just briefly to a few of the proposed service reductions and other measures council will have to consider in the coming year as we grapple with the budget in need of repair. Many of the proposals are sound suggestions with easy savings to be made through a reduction in graffiti removal services and verge mowing services. although that might be controversial. Others will be much harder to swallow, and I flag now that I think I will find it difficult to support such proposals as a cut to the community transport service provided by council. I agree with the points made by others at other times about cost shifting by the state government and how transport is a state government responsibility, but I can't see that as enough. If I were to wait for the Minns Labor government to do the right thing and spend money to support communities to thrive rather than give handouts to billionaire mates and developers, we'd be waiting a very, very long time. There is a clear moral imperative in my mind for the need for the community to pitch in to shoulder the costs required to make sure everyone in our community can thrive. The community transport service is a clear example of that principle in practice, and I would be loath to cut it in pursuit of a relatively modest financial benefit. Saying too to the mooted reductions in financial assistance and community centre contributions. Community centres are, to put not too fine a point on it, the centre of our communities. They already run amazing services on the smell of an oily rag, and so to contemplate further reductions in funding is deeply concerning to me. Also in the plan is speculation about the need for asset sales to address liquidity issues. This is a hugely concerning proposition to me, and the idea of privatisation of public assets is one I am strongly opposed to as a matter of principle. I note that no action is being taken on these suggestions in this delivery plan and acknowledge it is important for all options to be considered and given fair weighting. I will therefore reserve my judgment until we are equipped with all of the facts. But once these assets are sold, they are almost impossible to get back. They are lost to the future publics to whom we are also responsible and charged with stewarding the assets and services of this council and community. Other projects and programs are having to be delayed or put on ice. This situation is not tenable in the long run, and as is often the case, a saving today will cost us more in the future. But that's the unfortunate reality of the dire financial situation we are in. There's just so much I want to talk about in these reports, but I don't have enough time or bandwidth to touch on them all and do them all justice. But I do want to thank the council staff, as always, who have worked diligently to prepare these reports and papers for us to consider. You've certainly given us a lot to consider, and any criticism made about suggestions or content is not directed at you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Are there any other speakers? If there aren't, I might just quickly, before I give Councillor Berrigan the right of reply, I don't intend to speak at length, but I would endorse the words of Councillors Santa, Welsh, Holding and Hoy. And I would like to thank everyone who made a submission on this delivery and operational plan, contrary to the assertions here that we somehow fail at community consultation. There are very many submissions that we have received, more than any in previous community consultations on delivery and operational plans, and certainly more than almost all of our neighbouring councils and those in the Greater Sydney region receive. Having just returned from the Australian Local Government Association conference, it's very clear that the people of North Sydney are far more engaged on these financial matters than in other localities. And that goes to a council that's determined to engage and have people participate. But the other side of that is that we're councillors who've been elected to be community leaders. And so we have an obligation to give weight and consideration to those submissions and the community consultation. But ultimately, it's up to us to make what may be incredibly difficult decisions, but decisions that weigh up and have in balance both the needs of the current population, both residential and working, and the needs of the next generation. And unfortunately, the criticisms of these 8 informing strategies seems to be a trip back to the future, back to the councils of chaos, back to the councils who were engaged and dedicated to ad hocery, back to the councils who put millions of dollars of unplanned for and unfunded works through the traffic committee, back to the councils that committed without community consultation of any description to the North Sydney Olympic Pool redevelopment, back to the bad old days that frankly I stood to ensure would never happen again. And that's why those 8 informing strategies were important. They had a once in a generation engagement with our community between April and July of 2024. Those strategies don't just have a handful of future projects that are there to address the incredibly increasing population that we must accommodate over the next 5, 10, 15 years. But they are there to make certain that this is a council that is strategic, that this is a council that has a governance framework. And I note that the Liberal councillors voted against the adoption of a governance strategy, having overseen the chaos that we are here to clean up. They are there to ensure that the operations and the day-to-day operations and services and projects of this council are undertaken with a strategic approach, and that our community can hold the council staff and councillors to account through those strategies. So we're not having a time without certainty. We're having a commitment to intergenerational equity and to rigorous financial repair. And so I will echo those same concerns that I've always echoed, which is asset sales, and there aren't that many assets that this council holds, but asset sales deprive the next generation of opportunity. And I would just say to all those submissions we received from the users of the North Sydney Community Centre that there is absolutely no intention to reduce services to any of the community centres in the next 12 months or at all, but rather to consult and report back on your current financial position, and if there is any capacity for any of the community centres to contribute for the next 12 months, then that's something that the council may have to consider. But it's certainly not to address to reduce any of those really important services that I know our community value. So we've heard from a lot of loud voices. Now's the time over the next 6 months for us to hear from those who do appreciate council services, who rely on them, who need the buildings like Stanton Library, and would prefer that there wasn't sewage running down the walls of the Children's Library. For those people, those more than 6,000 users of the Crow's Nest basketball courts, who would rather that the roof stayed on and was waterproof. And that's just and let alone North Sydney Oval, and the need to ensure structural support for many of that ageing infrastructure. I could go on. This, as Councillor Berrigan at the beginning said, is no cause for celebration, but this is the prudent and careful and considered approach that this council is determined to take as we pursue long-term financial sustainability. So for all those reasons, I support the recommendation. Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I note the council will reduce its infrastructure renewal expenditure by 12.5 million in 25-26. This is on top of the kicking the can down the road for the last few years, which will result in a forecast infrastructure renewal ratio of 40.58%, well below the benchmark ratio of 100%. Over the past 2 years, council has reduced and deferred asset renewal budgets, postponed new and upgrading projects to maintain liquidity and fund rising costs associated with the North Sydney Olympic Pool project. This constrained renewal program will continue. And it is about the North Sydney Olympic Pool project. And it astonishes me that I still sit here and listen to the councillor that championed that and voted for it to go on and on about community consultation. Well, wouldn't that have been a nice idea for the North Sydney Olympic Pool? In fact, the independent report found that what was ultimately resolved upon by that council was something that was not in line with community expectations. And aren't we paying the price again and again and again? And to then want to not adopt a governing strategy. I can't join the dots on that one. I still find it very difficult to understand comments such as like, it could have just been 20%. Why wasn't it just 20%? Let's block that number out, 20%. Like IPART said, I'll approve 20%, let's put 20%. But then in the next narrative, it's like, there's no problem. We haven't got a financial crisis. Well, why would you be raising rates by anything if there is no financial crisis? So I'm kind of sitting here in this parallel universe saying everything's fine and dandy, council's running at a surplus, everything's great. And on the other side, we're raising rates by 20%. If anyone else can join the dots in that, please, I'm open to everything. The IPART report did, like Councillor Holding referred to, it did identify that there was a financial need. Inexplicably, and never before in the history of IPART have they ever found a council that is in financial need and done nothing. Absolutely nothing, the rate peg. This is new territory at all. I have read every IPART decision going back about 3 or 4 years, and the North Sydney Council one, to me, just does not make sense. But we move on, and we have to make the tough decisions. And I hear what Councillor Hoy says, and I agree. The decisions are going to be difficult, and some pretty much can't be on the table. Our community needs us. And when I have gone out to the community following the IPART decision, there's a seething anger that council didn't get the rate rise, not because everybody wants to pay, but everybody in the community knows that this council has inherited the disastrous debt from the North Sydney Olympic Pool project and was elected to address it. 3,000 people out of 70,000 residents, and then a couple of hundred come to speak. Absolutely, we listen to everybody, but there were more people here protesting against the Western Harbour Tunnel. So let's put that in perspective. The scare campaign about the rate rise was really quite appalling. And whilst everybody is accepting reluctantly that there is a financial crisis this council has to address, they don't think what has happened is fair. But they are all now putting shoulders to the wheel and saying, how can we help? And we will be calling on our community, and we'll be working with the community, and a lot of it is not nice. But it is where we're at. I again would like to thank the council staff. I do hear in some tones that in some way the council staff are responsible for the position that we're in. That is completely untrue. It is this council's, the governing body's decision that then guides what the council staff do, and any criticism of the council staff is unwarranted, unnecessary and inappropriate. Moving forward in terms of opportunities to raise funds, selling assets is an easy thing to put out there, but selling assets in a local government area is a difficult process because many times any resulting money cannot be spent like you would like. I will be voting against any asset sales as a measure until it's a matter of last resort.
Thank you. On that basis, I'll put the item. All those in favour? And those against? And that is carried. And that brings us to the end of this extraordinary meeting. Thank you all for your participation. And the next ordinary meeting of council is at the end of the month. Oh, we do. My apologies. We have a second tranche relating to those 4 pages. So Councillor Welsh and Councillor Carr, if you would please leave the, so reopen the meeting. If you would please leave the chamber. Okay, have I got a mover? Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor.
Log off.
Now you have to log off. We'll just wait for you to log off.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the similar motion for, as before, that for pages 50, 71, 92, 124 and 121 of
127.
127 of 442, the same recommendation with number 2 in relation to the Neutral Bay Community Centre.
Let's be clear on what you're moving.
Oh, I can't say it all.
Yeah.
So
if you could use the resolved motion from the first tranche and just have a preamble that says that in relation to pages 50, 71, 92, 124 and 127 of 442, council adopts.
And the number 2 is good.
Yeah. But in respect of pages. Yeah. Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by councillor Santa. Is there any discussion? I'll put that item. All those in favour? And those against? And that is carried. And my apologies, that now brings us formally to the end of this extraordinary meeting. Thank you.